Hello and welcome back to Old Soul Podcast. My name is Bree, that's spelled B-R-E-I. Thank you so much. Today's film commentary is about the film Ghost. It was released in 1990 with a rating of PG-13 and it has a runtime of 2 hours and 7 minutes. The director of this film is Jerry Zucker. So with Ghost, I have seen it a lot of other times. Again, whenever I watch a film that came out in a later time period, I suppose anything before the early 2000s, maybe even a little farther back than that, but I always want to start with the fact that, did I think this film aged well in terms of maybe cinematography, CGI, special effects, any problematic things that might have arisen while watching it? And while there were a few things that I questioned about Ghost, there were some things that I saw that were a little small or very sort of stereotypical with the choice of casting in certain even smaller roles that I was sort of like, okay, yeah, I guess. But other times you could tell that they were joking and it was intentional and it sort of worked still and things like that. But I won't get into too much detail because I didn't think it was too bad. I just always like to preface with that and sort of speak about that. But we're going to go right into it because I'm sort of low on time today. So the first sort of topic that I wanted to talk about that shows up in Ghost is romance, and how is romance dead in 2023? I suppose I'm a pessimist and I'm not like a super bubbly, positive, happy-go-lucky person. And I feel like I have enough reasons as to why I'm like that. Maybe it's trauma, maybe it's just my experience. I feel like all of it's very valid anyway. But romance in general, I feel like the romance genre is sort of dead, but it's starting to revive itself, or maybe that's just romantic comedy. I'm not sure. But watching this film revitalized that thought of, wow, I understand why people thought that like love and being in a relationship was like the it thing. And they still do, and I feel like they always will, although I just feel like love has a lot of propaganda behind it and a lot of like false claims of people not really understanding what they're getting into and then being super, super disappointed in like the final results of what they've gotten into. But I do feel like this film sort of enlightened the idea of a good relationship and what it really means to have a relationship and to be in love. And I just felt like romance was portrayed so well between our two main characters, Molly, who's this artist, and I think she's going to be sort of spotlighted in this new, I want to say it was an article or whatever work she's working on. She's a working artist. I believe they're in the city of New York, and she moved into this new place where there's tons of space for her to do art, and she's very creative, and she moved into the space with her boyfriend Sam, and we're assuming that they've been in a relationship for quite a while. They don't even like to say I love you. Like Molly says it and Sam sort of responds in a different way. It seems like the film hints at Sam possibly have going through stuff in the past. Just he makes statements like, oh, I don't want to get too used to this because, you know, if everything's going so well, I'm like waiting for the other shoe to drop, which it does. And it could just be the film foreshadowing, of course, because Ghost is pretty much like sad from the get-go. I don't know how the trailers were released during the time in the 1990s. If you knew right away that Sam was going to be a ghost, but I'm sure they were sort of letting you know possibly that was the thing. So you would assume that right away he dies. Okay, right? Again, I always give spoilers. But anyway, these two are in this very loving, good relationship. They have a close friend named Carl, who both Molly and Sam seem to like. Carl works at the same job as Sam, but it seems like Sam is a little higher up and he's even about to get promoted. So there's like these good things happening, moving in together in this big place, and their careers are doing well, and they seem to have people around them that really love and care about them. They seem really happy, and we're just in the midst of their love. And it's just such a reoccurring constant thing throughout the film how much they love each other. The music really heightens that love, the shots. So it's portrayed as this really simple, smooth plot with depth. But the heart of it is the couple. A couple in love, starting a new life together, moving in together, changes in their careers, even talks of marriage. Pretty early in the film, actually, right when things go terrible for Sam. And it's just sort of another way for us to be so tied into our characters, just for things to be taken from us right away. The would have been, could have been, should have been is gone immediately. But the build up to that is so earned. Like, the way that it sets it up with their romance makes the tragedy that happens so traumatic and so sad, because the build up really gives us a climax that was earned. Okay, so right after all that lovey-dovey, we're getting to know everyone. We see the relationship between Sam and Carl, his co-worker slash basically best friend, and how that all works with Carl, Sam, and Molly, and like where they are in their life and their relationship being basically the main driving force in this plot, and portrayed very healthily, by the way. And then Sam gets killed. He gets shot, by the way, by this man named Willie. And I'll get into the details. So after all that loving stuff, we then immediately follow death. Death happens. Death occurs. And then we find out that it was planned. It was a planned theft that turned into a murder scene. So basically, Sam and Molly go to this like theater, and they see a show, and they're talking, and then they start talking about how they love each other and maybe they should get married, and Sam never says it enough for Molly, and she's communicating that she needs that from him. And they're just, again, being such a cute couple and such a healthy relationship, I would say. And then there's this random guy who peeks out of the shadows, sends them on high alert. He threatens to take Sam's wallet. Sam refuses, and they have this sort of little back and forth fighting. Molly's yelling for Sam to sort of stop, and she's asking for help. And then Willie, who is the guy who approaches them, which they obviously didn't know his name at the time, he's just a robber, he shoots Sam, and then he runs off. Sam's bleeding. Molly's on the ground holding him, screaming for help. But we don't see that right away. We see the fight, and then we see Sam running after Willie when he runs off. But then when Sam turns around, we see the scene of his body and the blood everywhere, and Molly, his girlfriend, holding him and asking people for help, and people run over and help. And Sam is realizing that he's not in his body, and he's also realizing that he has died, right? Because he is this entity that no longer exists in his body. He sees this light come through, but he doesn't necessarily go toward it, but he sees it. And then it goes away at some point. We're in a hospital. We see his body being rolled out, and the cover is covering his face entirely, which is almost a designated sign of you're dead. And we see Molly just sort of stone face cold, walking out, saying nothing. Another ghost comes by and sort of asks Sam, like, what happened to him? Sam's still very confused. He looks at Sam's body on his own, and he's like, oh, he got shot. Oh, yeah. And he says some comment. And basically, that is a sort of realization for Sam that he is no longer alive. And how traumatic is that? How traumatic is that? So, yeah, then we find out who's connected to Sam's murder, and that's when we start getting into all this craziness. And again, I'd like to say that this plot just started out with a romance. It could have easily stayed there, but we take such a drastic turn pretty early in the film. Something that was supposed to be a theft turned into a murder scene. Sam dies, but he is now this existing ghost that can see everything that's going on around him, but can't physically connect or communicate with anything in this world. He saw the light, he ignores the light, he doesn't go toward the light, And now he's just in this weird in-between gray space of existing, and he doesn't know what to do. He sees Molly grieving, he sees her staying inside the house, not going anywhere, processing his own funeral. He tries to talk to her, but she can't hear him. He's going around and encountering other ghosts as he's maneuvering around the city. And he soon finds out that the person in charge or behind the reason why he's dead is his best friend, Carl. But the way that he finds out mostly is because he runs into this psychic. He sort of goes into the shop to see if she's a real psychic, and we find out that she definitely was a scammer in her past life, and she's still sort of scamming and lying. But she does actually hear Sam, and she's actually the only person that does hear Sam, and she's even surprised by it. She states that her family line has had a history of psychic abilities and seeing or hearing ghosts, but this is the first time that she's ever heard a ghost, and I think she only hears Sam. I don't think she can physically see him at that point, just like everyone else, but she's the only one who can hear him. So he's communicating to her like, I want you to get a message to Molly, I'm still here. Sam realizes that he can't move things, but he sees some ghost on the subway be able to move things, and they have a whole a section where that crazy ghost on the subway shows him how to move objects and how to do that and where to get that energy. And that happens a lot later, but still, I just want you to sort of understand what's going on. And so Sam and Oda become sort of this package deal where he needs her as that other connection to reality and to Molly. And Oda goes and tries to talk to Molly, and Molly believes Oda after a while because Oda is saying things that no one would know but Sam. And she tells Carl, and Carl's like, what are you talking about? And blah, blah, blah. And then we see that Carl was working with Willie, and he's like, well, who are you talking to? Because Molly's over here saying stuff that she shouldn't know, but there's no way she's getting it from a ghost, blah, blah. He clearly didn't believe the ghost story, but he knows that Molly knows some stuff. And so we have to backtrack before we get into this Carl debacle. Basically, Sam works in some sort of accounting field for some company, and he is noticing that there's too much money in the accounts that he is in charge of monitoring. And the only other person who has had access to those accounts that we know of from the film is Carl, who was given a code by Sam, and Sam later changes it when he's going through and looking through the numbers, and stuff's not adding up, but there's too much money, and there shouldn't be. And Carl's sort of dismissive of it, but he asks, oh, I was checking the codes or whatever, why isn't it working? Oh, Sam's casually, oh, I changed it. And then Carl's trying to pull more out of Sam, and that's why Sam tells him all the things about what he's noticing. And then Carl sort of subtly says, oh, what are you doing tonight? Oh, and Sam's like, oh, I'm going to the theater. That's that theater that he left with Molly. Remember this. Ooh. And then, yeah, then we're done. And then that whole debacle happens between Sam and Willie, and Sam dies. And it's more of a debacle. Like, literally, Willie murdered Sam. And with something that was supposed to start as a theft, which is also crazy. Because, like, why did it escalate so bad? But anyway, we find out that Carl hired Willie to steal Sam's wallet so that Carl could get the passcode and get access to that money that is now the equivalent of $4 million, but there's too much money in the accounts, which means if Carl gets found out, not only does he lose his job, he loses his reputation, probably gets jail time, so on and so forth, so he can't have that. So he put Sam in the situation of threatening him, and then the guy that he hired ends up killing Sam. But then Carl takes no accountability for putting Sam and Molly in that situation. And even after he knows what happens, he doesn't go to the police, because then he'd have to give himself up because it would show motive. Yeah, Carl's a piece of shit. He's not Sam's real friend. He's a fucking thief. He's a terrible person. He literally is the worst. He is around Molly trying to still get the passcode because he never got the wallet, by the way. Willie ran off without anything that night after killing Sam. So he's hovering around Molly. One, because I think he's secretly had a crush on her or has been infatuated with her for forever. So he's preying on her, trying to get her to be with him in a way. He's sort of sleazy in that way. And he wants those passcodes, so he's hanging around, acting like the dutiful friend who's concerned, but really he's just a piece of shit. And so all that is happening and occurring. And then Molly's just sort of like thinking that, oh, he's here for me. This was Sam's best friend. It's another piece of Sam in a way. You know, she's taking in that help because of course she is. She's grieving. And then Sam's having to sit and watch Molly go through all this and feeling terrible for her and still processing the tragedy that happened to him. And then to find out that the person who took his life away and the person that he trusted most, besides probably Molly, is the person that's responsible for his death. Like, that is wild. And it is just so unbearably hard to sort of sit and think about and settle in. It's sad. Ultimately, the theme here is that Carl is a fucking menace to society. Okay, so now we have the added element of Sam not being ready to leave Earth, even after he realizes he's dead and still roaming as a ghost. So even though Molly and Oda had that interaction after Sam found out that Oda could hear him, and it gets to the point where Carl has become a threat to Molly because he believes that Molly's the key to all that money, and he does eventually find the money, but then it gets taken out because Oda goes to this bank, and there's this whole funny scene of her taking out $4 million and getting it in a cashier's check or something and giving it away to these nuns. And Sam strategically wants to make sure that Carl does not end up with that money after knowing what Carl did to him for that money. But it does put Oda in a lot of danger. And although I think she's a great comedic relief, and I think that the chemistry between Sam and Oda is funny, and their relationship does read as like a long-term friendship, even though they just met each other, I do feel like Sam is a bit selfish in a way that is understandable. You know, he doesn't have a lot of options. He is running out of time in a way because Molly's in danger. He loves Molly. The love never went away, obviously. And Molly is very vulnerable, not only mentally and emotionally, but physically. And so, yes, Oda's put in a lot of very dangerous situations. She encounters Willie, him like searching when Carl finds out that Oda is going to Molly about all this stuff, and Molly's telling Carl all this stuff, not knowing that Carl's really behind this whole thing, which is super scary. And then Carl later showing up and threatening Molly and chasing Molly and Oda around once he finds out all the connections, and he starts to also believe that Sam is still existing when things start moving around and pushing him when Sam has found out how to actually interact with the real world in a way using his energy. And yeah, and like I said, Molly's in danger, but I really wanted to highlight the fact that Oda's put in a lot of danger in this film too, and she really powers through it and stands up for herself every step of the way, which makes me love her character so much. And Molly, you know, sees Oda at the bank and all these other things that help Carl, even though Molly's unknowingly helping the person that murdered Sam. That's an added level of really terror and real terror and sadness too. And ultimately, we get to some climactic scenes, but again, I just want to talk about sort of the aspect of Sam as a ghost. Him roaming this weird in-between. He loves Molly, and now not only does she have to grieve the loss of Sam, but she has to dig through the trauma of being present during the incident, which is super scary and traumatic. Sam is watching in real time as a ghost, but he can't console her. He's also trying to find out what happened to him, you know, or at this point he knows, but he's sort of having to find a way to live with it, but he's not even alive, right? But sort of coming to terms with things I can't even imagine. And he's trying to keep Molly out of danger, which doesn't really work. So again, I just noted all that stuff, and I'm just going back over it. Ultimately, I think besides his love for Molly, and in turn him also ending up really caring about and respecting Oda, he does fight for Oda too, although I think in the beginning he's a little selfish, not considering the situations he was putting her in, although he didn't know that Carl was so dangerous at some point too. So there's a lot of give and take here, push and pull, but still, ultimately, I do think his other motivator was getting justice, and he does end up getting justice. Willie ends up dying because Sam's chasing him, and Willie's running and not paying attention, and a car hits him. And honestly, the guy's terrible. And right away, the film also sort of validates us in that, yeah, Willie was a terrible person. You know why? Because Sam, when he died, he gets the light. He gets the you're going to heaven, sunshiny concept of what we assume heaven could or should be. And Willie gets these loud, eerie, dark shadow demon looking things that grab him, and he's screaming in horror and he's dragged away. That sort of solidifies the fact that not only did he die, but Sam got justice, and he is a bad person in turn. He's going to hell, we can assume. And the same thing happens when Sam's confronting Carl and fighting Carl and protecting Molly and Oda, who were running from Carl when they're at this climactic point of Carl being on to all of them and actually believing that Sam's a ghost because Sam is moving things and leaving threatening typing messages on these old style computers. If you know, you know. And Carl's threatening Molly, blah, blah, blah. But ultimately, Sam fights Carl in his ghost state of being. And this like giant glass frame from a window falls onto Carl. And Carl, again, also gets the eerie, creepy shadow demons. And he gets dragged to hell. And he dies. And Sam finally gets his justice. And he, even amongst all that, he sees the light at the end of the film. And he tells Molly to, keep her light, to keep going. He loves her, and she sort of gives him the I love you with the ditto sort of thing that they have between them. Inside joke, I guess it's a joke, I don't know. And not only this time does Molly hear Sam, but she can physically see Sam as this shining sort of light, angel, ghost, whatever he is at this point. And Oda sees him too now, and she doesn't just hear him. And he sort of gives us a goodbye, and we have these lovely moments in between and throughout the films where we see these two with close-ups of their tender touching and their intimacy and their clear love for each other. And then at the end, that never goes away. It's still there. It's so beautiful. And I really loved it, appreciated that. So some other scenes that I thought were great were the ceramic scene, the iconic ceramic scene of Molly doing her artwork and on this sort of, I don't know what it's called, but she's making sort of this pottery, and you know how it's sort of like clay that you have to form and mold, and you add water to it, and it softens, and you can shape it. And she's showing Sam how to do that, and they're also being very, like, I don't want to say sexual. I think it's more sensual and intimate in the way that it's portrayed, but it's such an iconic scene. And then the ending, when I talked about, like, the climactic ending of Sam saying his final goodbyes and going to heaven and getting his justice and knowing that everyone is okay and that he found out the truth, and it's sad and it's tragic, but he got through it. I thought that was a really good scene because I like an ending where people get retribution for the fuck-ups of others. And then, again, I think any scene that sort of portrayed their romance was so well done because it was so believable, so well executed, and really makes you want to believe in love, honestly. And the back and forth between Oda and Sam is always great. There's some great dialogue there, but also just good chemistry. And ultimately, my conclusion would be that love takes work, communication, changes, new experiences. You encounter tragedy, setbacks, obstacles. Can it be effortless with the right person? Maybe. In a way, it is easy. I'm inclined to say that nothing ever is, but there's a healthy version, and then there's just a toxic turmoil that we don't want to ever get into. And I think this film, in a way that a film only can, right, portrays it in a good light that I feel like is realistic, in a way. Hopefully this isn't happening in your love life. It's such a lovely film, and romance is really the heart of it, I think. Okay, so I'm going to go into my quote segment, and then we'll be done. And I only have a few quotes today, so it won't last too long. Sam, I love you, Molly. I've always loved you. Molly. Ditto. Sam, screaming after Carl for causing his death. You bastard! You goddamn bastard! Why? I had a life, goddamn you! I had a life. Thanks, and see you next time. Bye.
Ditto, Taylor, ditto.